for joining us today for Master Coaches Wednesday Weekly Buzz and our after show Buzz Reaction. I'm Ruth Nelson, joined by Hall of Famers Mick Haley, Bob Bertucci, and Brian Gimolero, bringing you the most current issues and trends in volleyball. Our weekly news show has leaders in our sport provide their perspective on the questions that are asked, along with discussions on topics that are current and ones that are affecting all of us. Our news flash. The doors to the new era of college sports officially opened last Thursday. For the first time, all NCAA athletes are now able to make money from a wide variety of business ventures without losing their eligibility. The guidelines provided by the NCAA leave a considerable amount of gray area for schools to sort through and set up a system that will create different rules and opportunities for athletes based on the states where they attend school. Take Lexi Sun, Nebraska volleyball player, rolled out at midnight her own clothing line. Fresno State twin sister basketball players inked a deal with Boost Mobile with a billboard in Times Square. FSU lineman started a GoFundMe account to raise money for a physically handicapped fan to attend a football game. Unilever plans to spend $5 million over the next 5 years in partnership with college athletes promoting their deodorant brand Degree. And the list goes on. The biggest dilemma, what is an athlete's fair market value might be? Jump on sportico.com and also take a little time to check out Icon Source, as athletes can create a profile that assists them in matching athlete to companies so they can monetize their name, image, and likeness. Dreamfield, Open Doors, Altus, but there are so many: Teamworks, Game Plan, In-Athlete, Athlete Viewpoint, Navigate, WMT. If you're wanting to read up on NIL, we have given you enough reading for the rest of the year, maybe next year too. JVA announced the best in their beach class of 2021, 22, 23, and 24, recognizing the nation's top female JVA beach athletes. Jump over to jvavolleyball.org and check out the honorees. Want to make a difference? Please remember to renew your AVCA membership, this one organization that represents all coaches at all levels when lobbying for changes that are needed in our sport. And you can make a difference by registering at avca.org. We're in our final week of bringing you Master Coaches Re-Mix Flashbacks from previous shows. So jump on live at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time any Wednesday or anytime on our Volleyball Master Coaches Facebook page. Today, our guests range from a two-time Olympian becomes a mindset coach. A 14-year associate coach becomes the head coach. Live action from AVCA president and Big Ten coach at the NCAA Final Four. And finally, a great discussion with coaches from the WCC, Big Ten, and Pac-12 on how they actually moved the COVID challenge into positive outcomes for their team, program, staff, and universities. So enjoy our series 4 of our Master Coaches Re-Mix Flashbacks. Let's head over to Austin, Texas, where our AVCA Hall of Fame coach, Mick Haley, will introduce our guest today. Mick?
Well, thank you, Ruth. And I always start with, did you know that Ruth Nelson was our favorite Hall of Fame coach of the whole group here, and head coach of 3 Division I schools, as well as assistant coach and player on our national team. So Ruth, thank you for those nice introductions. It's my pleasure to introduce 2 guests today. We want to get started to hear from these folks. First is Nicole Davis, and Nicole is a 2-time national championship player from USC, 2-time Olympian, which I'm sure she is extremely proud of, and almost got that gold medal, really pushed the team to nth degrees, and now is a mindset coach with Compete to Create, a group that she'll talk a little bit about with all of us. And Sean Huiet, the head coach at Texas State University, who's a first-year coach guiding his squad through this COVID pandemic, and playing in conference and beating up on people with a 16-1 record so far. So welcome to both of you. Thank you for being here. I'm going to start with Nicole. And Nicole, I'm just going to give you an easy one. Can you give us a short background and explain what your position is currently and how you got in this vocation?
Sure. I retired from the national team in 2015 and kind of didn't know what to do. I had a degree from political science from USC, and I remember saying out loud, I will never go back to school. And I happened to get like teamed up with a company called Compete to Create. It was co-founded by Pete Carroll, and for those of you who don't know him, he's the head coach of the Seattle Seahawks, and Mike Gervais, who's a licensed clinical psychologist in the state of California, who specializes in high performance, high consequential environments. And when I first started with Compete to Create, we were working entirely with Fortune 500 companies. And we've since expanded our offerings to individuals and to smaller organizations and businesses, as well as teams. And really what we're doing is bringing like the collective IP of those two co-founders. So Pete's IP is in developing high performing cultures. And then Dr. Mike's IP is really grounded in the psychology of high performance. And so what happened for me is I was in this and I was working with, for example, Microsoft, and I started to have more science and language to put to my experiences playing on the Olympic team. And for me, like I was a two-time Olympian before I learned that you could formally train your mind. And there were many occasions on the national team where I was wearing a USA jersey where it almost felt like I was leaving it up to chance how I was showing up. So I started sharing my stories because I was on the applied side of the science at the time. And there was just something about the way it was resonating with people. And there was something about how people gravitated towards psychology and gravitated towards this idea of like thriving and optimization. But it's been something we've ignored both in sport and in corporate environments. We double down on training craft and we double down on training our bodies, and we infrequently take the time to invest in the psychology of performance. So I reached a point where I was like overwhelmed by how much more I wanted to learn about psychology. So I'm in my second year of a doctoral program doing clinical psychology and really in the deep end of the science, and what I was quite averse to going into, which was disease and dysfunction, but I think it matters. I think if we want to understand thriving and optimization, then we need to understand the other side of the human experience.
Wow.
Okay, well, thanks. Brian, I'll pass to you.
I'm just sitting here listening and thinking how much you could help us. You know, I know this group.
I know this
Sean,
group.
Yeah, Sean, you know, we have a pre-production meeting on Mondays, the four of us, and we come up with what we're going to talk about. And what you were fascinating because you're a first-year coach, and we were wondering what you could tell other first-year coaches, what you learned and how you're doing, especially after being 14 years as an assistant coach. But so many people who listen to us are new coaches. And we were wondering what you had to say. But in our pre-production meeting, Bob said, you know, at 16-1, maybe we shouldn't say much. Maybe he should talk because we could really screw him up, you know?
Yeah, please don't jinx this. I'm gonna knock on wood there for a second.
Yeah, we're hoping that we're not going to screw you up. So we're going to listen to you more than you listen to us. It's been a long time since we were first-year coaches.
That's what Mick had said to me, and I joke with everyone. I'm like, be a head coach. They said it'll be fun. This is what you work for, right? And then COVID happened. So the hardest and the biggest thing is just the unknown. It's been so fluid. Things are changing every day. We're sitting here right now. We're supposed to leave at 7 a.m. tomorrow, and we won't know for about another hour if everyone's healthy and can go. And so all the unknown stuff. And so luckily for me, I'm pretty laid back. I'm pretty easygoing. And so not having to have it a set way. And with it being my first year, I think that's made it a little bit easier with the new staff. And you just don't know. Like our first weekend, we went out with 10 and a half kids. You know, one kid was injured, but the trainer was like, if she has to play, she has to play. We had a middle play outside. And so we've been really working with our team, and just hearing Nicole for a little bit, I'm like, I'm already signing up for whatever she's doing, because the mental side of it has been so crazy with not knowing, you get a call and a kid saying she has to quarantine for 14 days, then they have to try to get back in the gym, then and all the unknown has probably been the hardest, but kind of being, hey, this is our team met, their goals were the same. They wanted, if the Sun Belt was playing, they wanted to three-peat, they wanted to get back to the NCAA tournament, and those goals didn't change. So what we're doing in the gym has been similar, but we're just a little bit more low-key on some things that we're not trying to, we can't control a lot of what's going on. So we say every day, control what we can control, everything else is going to play, and that's how it is. So crazy times.
Yeah, how about the coaching itself? That's a really unique experience. But just let's say it's next year. Let's say things are better. What do you feel about the, being a new coach? What are your concerns, or what do you feel? How can you help new people?
I think one of the things that's been, with the COVID and everything, one is that we talked, I've never been a part where every kid has played significant minutes on our team. There's sometimes you have a lot of role players or people down the bench that, we have to be ready for everyone to go. And so it's kind of helped build relationships in a different way with people that are different roles on the team. It's made me, I'm uber competitive. Obviously, I want to win a lot of matches, but also be able to look at the long haul of like, we need to be really good at the end of this. And we don't know, like in 2 weeks, if we test before we go to the conference tournament and someone can't go, we need everyone to have that court experience. And so kind of has helped the training and the mindset, I think, for future years for me to be like, hey, everyone is so valuable in different ways, but this year it's like everyone, like I said, we played all 18 kids back-to-back weekends because we don't know what's going to happen. We need them to have game experience. We need them to have that. And it's just crazy.
Yeah. Well, Bob's got some serious questions for you.
I'm going to start first with Nicole, because a mindset coach, I'm not really sure what a mindset coach is. How does it differ from a sports psychologist?
Yeah, it's a good question. So for anyone to call themselves a psychologist, they should be a licensed psychologist. And so what a sports psychologist is typically is a licensed clinical psychologist that has specialized in sports. A mindset coach is someone who has a background, whether it's a master's degree, typically it's a master's degree in sports psychology. But really mindset is like the way we think about things, and the way we think about things drives our emotions and our behaviors, and that's what drives performance. And so a mindset coach is someone who is looking to optimize the way we think and understand ourselves, and to train skills. So sometimes with psychology, you get into like talk therapy, and talking is nice, it diffuses some things, but then it doesn't allow for skill building. And so in the same way that like in sport, we teach skills and then we do drills for repetitions for skill building, mindset coaches will do the same thing. Like self-talk, which is the essence of confidence, is something you can actually build as a skill. And so that's what mindset coaches will do. And it differs from a sports psychologist in that sports psychologists can get into clinical issues. So general anxiety, major depressive disorders, personality disorders, which quite frankly are part of elite performers. But the clinical psychologists or sports psychologists can get into that aspect of clinical issues, whereas a mindset coach will just look at the optimization piece.
So is it more similar to a team builder or a leadership coach?
Yeah, to be honest, Bob, I don't even know what the hell a team builder is. A leadership coach. So I'll say this, most individuals who have some sort of certification in leadership, the psychology of performance is not necessarily robust in the training of that. And so someone who is a mindset coach should have a robust understanding of the theory of performance.
So how do you actually measure the relative success, and balance out the time you put into this as a coach, all right, as a volleyball coach, the time you'll spend out of your training for this as it translates into success on the court?
Yeah, I love that question. If I'm working with a team or an organization, what I'm looking for are things like, is there psychological safety as part of the culture, right? So is there psychological safety? Do people feel like they can go for it and there won't be personal repercussions for it, like their character won't be attacked? Is vulnerability demonstrated? Is there a willingness to hold self and others accountable? And why those matters is it means there's trust inherent in the organization as part of the culture. And we know that trust is really important for success. The other thing I'm looking for, like, do the individuals on the team or in the organization, do they feel like there's a sense of meaning and purpose in what they're doing? Because what I know to be really true is if you can't connect to meaning and something bigger than yourself, then when stuff gets difficult, you're gonna take care of you first, or you're gonna bail too early. And so I wanna know if there's meaning and purpose, if there's a subjective experience of that. And then if I'm working with an individual, quite frankly, I hope they never need me again. Like, like there are certain therapists that want their clients to come back over and over. That means I'm not doing my job if you still need me a year from now or 2 years from now, because that means that we haven't been able to generalize skills well enough for you to go get yourself in challenging and adverse moments and have what it takes. So I'm really looking for like teams and organizations to no longer need me at some point. And that's how I define
Out of
success.
business, Nicole.
Yeah, this is, we got to work with you on a business plan here.
Trust me, there's enough to go around.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, Sean, before I, punt to Ruth, I got one other thing I got to just relate to you. I don't know how you're doing it right now, and I'm glad you're doing such a good job, because just today, I found out about 4 guys on my team, that can't be at practice, so they're going to be out for 14 days. All right, and we're not playing the games right now. I can't imagine how you're dealing with that and the psychology behind, handling it with the players. So speak to that a little bit more for us, especially for anybody that might be in the same situation.
No, definitely. That's what we keep saying. Like, everyone needs to be ready, prepare. The unknown is so crazy in this right now. And a couple weeks ago, we were, we were in that first preseason top 15, and then we didn't play for 2 weeks. So then we dropped out, and then Louisiana jumped up and they were undefeated. We were going to their place. And the day before we left, my O1 and my top sub tested positive and couldn't go. And that's where I say, like, the trust and I talked to 03, I talked to this person, like, here we go. It doesn't matter. We're still winning. Our goals didn't change because so-and-so can't go. Y'all said at the beginning of the season, our goals weren't changing. So everyone has to be ready to step in. And so it's hard on the mental side for us, because we literally 6 hours before you get ready to get on the bus, you find out someone can't go.
We have a very special guest. Jim Stone is on today. Very special for me because I worked for Jim's father, who was the athletic director at Kellogg Community College. And Jim was a very accomplished high school basketball player out of Battle Creek Central. Came to Kellogg, played basketball, and started playing volleyball in our gym. And I was really excited. He got to be very good, went to Ball State, played there, was an outstanding player for the Cardinals, and then headed over to Ohio State after being at Wyoming and a few places to be the head coach for, I think, about 21 years. Isn't that right, Jim?
27.
Oh, wow. Well, see,
It
time
felt like 35, but
27 years at one spot is pretty good. So the question is, Jim, what have you been doing since you decided to walk away from that? And I know you were stimulated about doing something different and still making a contribution to the game. So tell us a little bit about where you've been and how you got to where you are now.
yeah, well, first of all, thanks for the invite and participating. Yeah, when I left Ohio State, I still wanted to be involved in the game, but maybe not at the collegiate level as much. So I was fortunate to be asked by Tom Pingle at the time to do the USA Youth National Team, or the U18 team. And that afforded me the chance to kind of bebop around the world and watch different coaches coach and different systems and different approaches to the game. And I thought it was just exactly what I wanted it to be, just a real challenging and kind of a reinvigoration of my approach to the game. And it made me reevaluate what I was doing and why I was doing it. So that was a great experience. I did that from 2007 to 2019. And we were fortunate enough to win the FIVB World Championship in 2019. And I thought that'd be a good time to walk away from that. And then in this whole pandemic scenario, I decided to kind of put some of the things that I've accrued over the years into an ebook format. And the reason at this point it's just an ebook and it might morph into a hard copy is I wanted the video component to be very important, and the ebook format just affords that very easily. So what I've tried to do is create a framework for club directors and coaches in terms of a springboard, both, from the beginning level all the way through to the advanced player. What are we doing and why are we doing it this way and why are we doing it in this order and what are the things we should be emphasizing? Because it's my part of my deal with youth national team. I was also doing club volleyball on the side, and it just seems that there's a lot of as we approach the teaching process, there's a lot of kind of let's do a little of this and let's do a little of that and let's play queen of the court and then let's play. But there's not a lot of instruction. So what I tried to do is just crystallize everything into an academic format, for lack of a better term, and give coaches an idea of, okay, I'm doing this with my 13 and under team because, and they've got a good reason for that.
Well, that's pretty interesting. Now, where are you living?
I'm in the snowy city today of Fort Collins, Colorado.
And have you been residing there for a while?
Yeah, in Colorado, actually, ever since I left Ohio State. So I'm working on 10 years or so.
Okay, so it gives you kind of a home base to kind of look out across to the United States, and not only the United States, but parts of the world, and kind of give you a neutral kind of perspective on what you're seeing. And you put that into a book, and now you have a website also. What is the website where you can find the book?
It's jimstoneconsulting.com. I'm not sure how much consulting I'm doing, but it sounded pretty good at the time. So, and what I'm trying to do with that site is just make it a source of volleyball information without me necessarily making a case for you have to do things this way. We're doing read broadcasts of the MasterCoaches weekly buzz, and I want to cycle through a lot of information that, if nothing else, I find interesting, and hopefully other people do as well. And I'm trying to augment that with a semi-weekly blog where I'm kicking out ideas, if nothing else, to challenge coaches, challenge the coaching community to think and analyze what I'm doing, and maybe I can try a different way and see how it works.
Well, it's interesting what you say, because the master coaches have gotten together primarily for some of the same reasons that you have produced your website and your book. We have felt like there needs to be a reason and a methodology on how to teach and how to not allow players to just use their athleticism to plateau, so to speak, and go along. Bob Bertucci is one of our master coaches, and he's written a number of books throughout the years. Bob, do you have questions for Jim?
Well, I have a lot of things to talk to Jim about, but I can't talk to him about all of them on the air here.
Because he'll tell stories, right?
Yeah, I got stories.
He's got some stories. Well, on a more serious note, Jim, I got to tell you, like Mick said, I've done a number of books over the years. Your ebook is absolutely outstanding. I mean, I went through it from cover to cover. I just love it. I mean, because I'm not a big ebook reader, so it was my first experience really doing ebooks. So I thought it was really cool. All right. But one of the things that really stood out was the videos in the book. So I don't know how much reading I actually did. I did a lot of watching and listening. And so I really enjoyed that. It's kind of like driving and doing your books on tape. So, let's talk a little bit about this checklist. You give 8 different reasons for the checklist. And then as I went through it, I saw that each thing you covered had a little checklist in it. And why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Well, I mean, there's kind of a story behind the format. I went into the hospital a year and a half or so ago and to have a procedure. And I was really curious about how the medical profession approaches their craft and how everything is based upon, did we do this? Did we do this? And they're going right down a list. And then the supervising comes in and, okay, did you do this? And they're checking things off. And it just intrigued me about, certainly pilots do a similar thing. Construction people do a similar thing. It's a very organized approach to their craft. And then I started, matriculating that thought to, well, what are coaches doing to make sure that the 13s coach is teaching this, and that will go into what the 14s coach is doing and all the way up through. And the answer that I came up with was, well, we're not doing too much. We kind of do the shotgun approach and, we'll do a little of this, a little of that, like I mentioned before. And all I wanted to do with the checklist is, okay, I've got this beginning player, are we teaching them how to run correctly? Are we teaching them how to throw correctly? And what is correctly? So I just tried to lay that out because I've worked with all the coaches here and I know that all of you are pretty meticulous in how you teach the game. And I think as a profession, we've kind of veered away from that and we do more playing than we do teaching. So I tried to construct the book from an academic perspective and just see if we can lay out a template that coaches might find useful as they're working with the various age groups.
Well, I thought that was a great concept because, all of us over the years, without really actually thinking about it, kind of go through that checklist, but it makes it, it's kind of like anything else. If you put it down in writing, you're more apt to start at one point and finish at the point you want to finish at. And I think that's what the checklist seemed to be doing as I was going through the book and taking a look at it.
Well, it allows the coach for sure to kind of have a guide. But what I'd like to do is have this morph into putting the checklist in front of the player. So we're developing more knowledgeable players in terms of, okay, if I'm working on my arm swing for attacking, it has to have these components. I gotta be able to open my chest up and rotate my upper body and do some things that are just biomechanically correct. And I think a lot of players, through no fault of their own, and I'll state it kind of crudely, they don't know what they're doing. They're playing, and they're good athletes, so they achieve some level of success, but they really don't know the game. So hopefully we can kind of provide both coaches and then eventually players with enough knowledge of the game that we're just developing a lot more of a sophisticated approach to the game.
Well, you talked about, for example, tracking and catching. All right. And I watched that video. I thought it was pretty neat. And it's so basic, but so important. So if I'm a young, coach, how long do I want to spend doing stuff like that when, hey, in 2 weeks, I gotta play a tournament?
Well, I mean, if we're talking about just those skills, I don't think it's either or. I think we just have to be aware of everything that goes into the game. If I cannot run correctly, it's going to be hard to run a ball down on defense. A hitting approach has running components, blocking footwork has running components, setter releasing out of the back row has running components. So if I've got a 13-year-old that is running and flailing their arms all over the place, it's going to impact those skills. So I think if we can spend 5 minutes with using the example you provide in terms of catching the throwing, in terms of, hey, instead of mindlessly jogging around the court, let's work on throwing against the wall, and we'll use that as warming up our arms, or spinning a ball over the net. But the coach is providing them with some feedback in terms of, remember, you got to get your elbow back now. You can't be just like you're throwing darts, and just you make it part of the coaching process, and it just bleeds into preparing your team to play.
Okay, great. Last question I have for you, and you kind of touched on this a little bit. How do you feel about the way we're teaching, training, coaching volleyball right now in the United States, especially at the club, junior level?
I think we're playing too much. There's too much competition and not enough practice. I don't know of any other sport where there's such an emphasis on playing and competing. And as you mentioned, people are always getting ready to play. And I wish there's more of a focus and time allotted just to becoming, more skilled in the game. So my overall thought is at every level, we play too much in practice. And that doesn't mean you never play in practice, but there has to be a component of, working on just the skill development. I think we've got some great athletes playing the game right now, but I don't think we're doing them any favors by just pigeonholing them into a position and only teaching them to do one or two things. And that's what I loved about international volleyball, is everybody had to do everything, and you had to be good at it, or the other side was good enough to pick you apart and exploit your weaknesses. So I found that to be extremely challenging as a coach. And man, if I could vote to get away from 15 subs and get down to 8 or 9 and encourage that style of play, I would really do it.
Yeah, I mean, basically, like Mick had alluded to, Master Coaches got started with the idea that, we've kind of lost this whole technical aspect and teaching aspect of the game. And it's, more like roll the ball out and we'll just play. And like you said, there's a lot of value in playing. You got to play, because that's what you're doing. You're playing the game. But there are a lot of areas where, coaches just need to know. I mean, our whole championship skills series was based on, correct, motor, development and skills and techniques. And really, I think your book kind of addresses a lot of that stuff. And I thought it was really good.
Well, like I said earlier, I've been in Brian's gym and Mick's gym for sure, and your gym and Ruth's gym. And I know there's a whole lot of time that was spent on a very meticulous approach to the game, and coaches hitting balls 18 inches outside the defender's feet, and they're working on stepping out, and they got really good at it. And then that afforded them a chance to become a better defender when they're playing 6-on-6. And
I think we've got our AVCA president, Sharon Clark, who's the head coach at Butler University, just jumped on, and we are ready to hear a little bit from Sharon.
Well, it's exciting to have Sharon. If you're there, you are. All right, Sharon.
I'm doing all right.
We have pulled Sharon right off the convention floor, and we want a update on how you view the tournament. The first 4 matches are over. You've got to see everything running firsthand and up close. Tell us what you see and about the experience for the players and the teams.
Sorry about that. Well, let me apologize for all the noise. It's a little hard to find a quiet space here with Wi-Fi, and that's open, right? So they have a lot of stuff kind of sectioned off and closed off, which is great for the athletes to keep them safe, but it's a little hard from a spectator's position to do that. So I apologize. You know, I think it's all in the perspective of who you are and what's coming. There are a lot of happy parents here, obviously. And when I landed yesterday evening and came in, there were some parents from Ryder. They were super excited to finally see their child play, and that, you know, that school had never been into the NCAA tournament. So that was kind of fun for them, right? That's kind of, you know, that's what it's all about. And standing next to us was a group from Notre Dame, and, you know, they've been several times. So they were kind of comparing this to last year and what's normal and regular. I think, you know, on the ground here, I think that there are some players who are extremely happy to be playing. And I was pleased to see that today. You know, they're just excited to be a part of it and be out on the floor playing. But the look is definitely different. You know, being in a convention center, that part is not what we're used to. I would say it's a little more, the look is a little glorified club-ish, you know, looking like a club tournament. Dave will probably, you know, tell you that. Because there's some stands sitting up around the courts, but to try and get all these multiple courts in and teams playing at the same time, that was a little difficult. So it's not the usual look that, you know, our kids are used to seeing, our athletes are used to when they go on campus and play in this first and second round. But I saw some happy folks playing today.
Well, that's wonderful. Coaches, do you have anything special to ask Sharon about real quickly? So something that's really been bugging you or that you're interested in?
I was curious, what's the amount of people that are allowed to spectate? Is it 25% or?
Yeah, so I believe that it's at 25%. But you know, that those numbers are kind of relative because we're not talking about one venue,
right?
You know, two teams, you know, when you've got four courts going all at the same time. But you know, from the look, and you know, was sitting in some stands, they've got some things marked off, but it's a fair number. I would venture to say it's majority of parents, administrators, and folks close to the team, and then a few just fans.
Okay, Brian or
Sharon, hi Sharon, how are you? It's nice to see you.
I'm well, yes.
What do you see? How could it be better? I know it's we're all lucky to be playing and all that, and people are excited, but how could it be better? Like maybe even the next round, is there ways to improve it?
Well, I will say the thing that struck me most, I've been to a lot of NCAA championships in different sports as well as volleyball. I was a little disappointed when I landed and walked through the airport and I didn't see any signage, like just not even a basic sign like welcome to the volleyball championships. Now I'm hopeful that I missed it somewhere, but I doubt it. I think that, you know, for those teams coming in, right, you know, landing at the airport or just on the drive over, there wasn't a lot of signage out. The only signage I really saw was on the convention center or in like directly on it right there, or maybe one or two of the bigger hotels. But it would have been nice for the teams and coaches for it to just feel like Omaha was like we were here, you know. So I would say that was a little disappointing for me.
You know, one of my pet peeves is the NCAA always says, well, the numbers aren't very good of viewers and all that. And without publicity, what would the numbers be of any sport? You know, not even knowing that this is going to be going on. It's unfair. Yeah. It's truly unfair that if we publish, you know, I watched LeBron James's dunk 45 times today, you know, yeah. On all day, all night, but we can't get any publicity for our sport, less than any sport I know, given there's 330 teams or something like that. So it's sure. really, that's my pet peeve. And I'm glad you saw that. And hopefully somebody will start to do something to allow these numbers to be fair. That's
okay.
it.
Bob, do you have a question before?
Yeah, just one real quick one on the safety and that kind of thing, Sharon. You know, a couple of the teams didn't get into the tournament that would have qualified because of a COVID test and got knocked out. And some teams got their first chance ever, like you said, to get into the tournament. what's the chances that somebody at the tournament is going to end up testing positive and then the team get eliminated, or do you think they got it pretty contained?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm hopeful that we don't run into that, right? So I'm hopeful for these athletes that that's not something that, you know, because that's the worst thing that can happen. I would say that it's fairly safe in terms of like when you go into the convention center, but like I'm sitting in the Hilton right now and there are athletes everywhere with the general public. So, you know, picking up COVID is, you know, this clearly is not a bubble per se. And I think the age group that we're working with, it's very easy for them to forget and to really protect themselves so that their teams can continue to play and advance through the rounds.
Well, Dave, how do you look at the seeding? What do you think of your route for a championship?
Well, we were just happy we weren't an 8, 9, or 16. Really wanted to stay away from Wisconsin. I think that they're the heavy hitter at this point in time. And really, I thought after that, you can go 2 through, 15, 16. And I think you'll have some pretty good matchups in there. But obviously, we've got work to do before we can even be thinking that far along. We play the winner of High Point and Central Florida. And I've watched those two teams all week, and they're both plenty good enough to beat us if we don't come out and play at a good level. So overall, I think it's a fair draw. Oregon most likely is in our path if they can take care of Notre Dame, who won earlier today. And then we would see Kentucky to get into the Final Four. So I think it's a very fair path. I'm pleased with where we stand. It's just now time for us to do the work.
Dave, how are your players reacting to the situation, the way the tournament's set up, how they've been treated, your accommodations, those kinds of things?
Mick, players handle things a lot better than people like you and me do. And they're just taking it, rolling along with the punches. And it's been a tough year for athletes to deal. The volleyball part's been the best part of it for the players. The hard part has been not being able to be a college student, not being able to go out and enjoy their friends and what you want to go to college for. Volleyball has been, a pretty enjoyable part of it. And I think our kids have done a great job. We have not had, since the season began, a COVID case, knock on wood. And we certainly don't want to get one right now. I thought that Sharon brought up a pretty good point. There's no bubble out here. I mean, this is each team taking the responsibility, kind of like they have all season, of being in charge of what they're doing. And, I've seen a lot of people out gallivanting around. We're not one of those teams. I mean, we've been out taking walks. We're not going to stay in our hotel room the entire time. We've taken a few walks with our team, showed them a little bit of the town, but we're going to be very careful. We're here for a reason.
Is this a surprise that it's not a bubble, or were you aware of this before you got here?
No, they called it a controlled environment. They said it will not be a bubble. It will be a controlled environment. And we did not know what that meant, but it's not different. It's what we've been dealing with all year. Our people at Purdue, and I'm sure all of the institutions, have been very careful with how their teams have operated. And, we have a trainer that we call her Sergeant. She's pretty much, we're wearing masks everywhere we go. She's been very, very tough on our coaches and players. We get tested every single day, sometimes 2 different tests on a day. And our players know who's boss. That's for sure.
Wow.
So Dave, what's the environment like for the athletes? I mean, it's kind of a throwback to the 70s, where we used to go to the tournaments at UCLA and you'd have, 12, 15, 18 teams there. Are they enjoying that, or is that not what they were looking for?
I think it's different because you do see a lot of the teams at your hotel and you have opportunity to at least say hello to them and ask them how they're doing. And we're at a hotel with 4 other Big Ten teams, so we have some familiarity with those teams. But what you don't see here, Bob, are fans. That's the big difference of going to a Sweet 16
This fall. First, let's head over to Austin, Texas, where former Olympic coach Mick Haley will introduce our guest today. Mick?
Well, and did you know Ruth Nelson, AVCA Hall of Fame personality on our show, also lives in Dallas, Texas, and her last coaching position was at the University of Iowa. So not to leave you out, Ruth, you don't like to talk about yourself. We'll talk about you a little bit. Today, we have three premier collegiate coaches with us. Pretty exciting. Hugh McCutcheon, head coach, University of Minnesota, representing the Big Ten. Heather Olmstead, head coach, BYU, representing the WCC, which is the West Coast Conference. Dave Rubio, head coach at the University of Arizona, representing the Pac-12. Welcome, coaches, and thanks for being with us today. None of these conferences are playing this fall, and we're trying to understand how this is all going to play out. So, coaches, we're going to jump right into this. First question for you. The ACC, the SEC, the Big 12, and Sun Belt Conference all decided to play this fall. At least one Big 12 coach has indicated on our show, incidentally, that he's not even sure that there will be an indoor NC2A Division I championship this spring. Hugh, what have you been told about the spring championships, and why hasn't the NC2A committed to a site for a spring championship?
Well, yeah, thanks for having us. I've heard that there will be one. I think the little delay in terms of confirming a site is obviously the world's a little bit different, and they're just probably, dotting I's and crossing T's and making sure everything's good to go. But from what I can gather, the intention is to have something in Omaha, as the original site was supposed to be in this December. I think they're trying to keep it there, and I think they'll probably announce something here soon. What soon means exactly, I'm not sure, but I don't think it's months away. I think in the next weeks we'll know more. But from what I can gather from the NCAA, the intention absolutely is to have it. April 23rd through 25th would be the dates for that.
Okay, and Heather Olmstead, have you heard anything different?
No, I've heard the same as Hugh, and we're planning on there being spring championship. We're planning on starting our season in January. But of course, like Hugh mentioned, there's just a lot of unknowns. We don't even have a conference schedule yet, but all we can do is plan to move forward with practices, getting our team better, and giving them that carrot to dangle that there will be a championship, that there'll be a tournament, and keep moving forward. So I'm hearing the same thing as you.
Dave, any rumor that they're coming to Tucson instead of Omaha?
No, I wish that were the case. It'd be a little bit warmer, I think, but not much more on my end either. I think that we're all planning on conducting the championships and going through the season starting in January 22nd, and keeping our fingers crossed that happens.
All right, let's go to question 2. This is a little bit tougher, so we'll throw this one at Heather. All of the coaches, all of you are guests on our program, and all of you have football teams from your school who are playing football, but yet we're not playing volleyball. What's the reason, in your opinion, and is this good or is this bad that we're not playing?
So for our conference personally, I can speak to that. When the conferences dropped below the 50% and the championship moved to April, we moved and postponed to a winter schedule. If we had tried to play, September 24th was the date we were shooting for. We didn't have teams, and we have a majority of our teams in California in the West Coast Conference. They weren't on campus and they weren't training. So there really was no way we could start playing September 24th, such as, the Big 12 and SEC and some of those teams, even in October. I think up until a couple weeks ago, some teams weren't even playing 6-on-6. So based off of regionally where some of our teams are located in our conference, there really was no way for us to probably play this fall, and probably not even play, a shortened season either. So for us personally, that's pretty much what it came down to. And we're still unsure about January.
So Dave, you have a little bit of the California problem, yet your football team's playing. So what about you guys not playing in the Pac-12? And is this a good thing or a bad thing, or how do you read it?
Well, I don't really necessarily read on either way, good or bad. I think it's just the reality of what the situation is called for, and I think it was a right call for us. You know, at football, given the opportunity to not play without the financial ramifications, they wouldn't play. The money is a big deal. I think the TV money is a big deal. Every conference and every school is going to be suffering from the bottom line here from a financial standpoint. And so I think it's the right call for us on the West. The California schools have been really affected severely on this. You know, Cal hasn't even stepped in the gym yet. So we'll see. Hopefully, like Heather said, that we'll have the season starting in January.
The Big Ten's a little bit different, though, isn't it? You guys haven't been shut down anywhere. You just had a conference decision. So are you guys behind now because you're not playing?
Yeah, I'd agree with Dave. I don't think it's a good or bad. It just is what it is. It's a thing. And I would say that similar to the PAC, you know, the motive for canceling was absolutely in the best interest of student athletes. You know, once the antigen testing became a viable possibility for being able to manage the virus, then I think the financial realities of athletic departments, you know, without football versus athletic departments with football became a driving factor. So for us, you know, getting pushed, given our championships pushed to the spring, it's okay to start in January, and we'll have more information. We'll have hopefully better testing and maybe have a better handle on this thing. Who knows?
All right, Bob, take it away.
Well, I think Hugh just touched on part of my question. I'll start with Dave, though. Dave, it's great to see you again. Yeah, my question has to do with the testing. You know, how often, I mean, it's so important at the schools right now, whether you're practicing or playing, how often are you testing? And what are you hearing is the cost for the testing that you're doing right now?
Well, the testing has been an ongoing, there's been a lot of questions surrounding here anyway. And we were just given the green light 2 weeks ago to start antigen testing 4 days a week. And so they given us the opportunity to start playing full contact at least 3 days a week, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, limited practice time the other week. So we've been fortunate enough that one of the few schools in the country allowed to go full because of the testing. Not sure exactly how much the testing costs. I think it's more of the fact that it's not so much about the cost, but just the number of tests that's available. With basketball and football taking up much of the tests, I think it's just not as many tests for the other sports. And so we were fortunate enough where we're actually able to, you know, use the test to be able to start playing full contact.
Hugh, you mentioned antigen testing. Is that what you guys are using at Minnesota?
We will. Currently, we're doing the PCR nasal swab, and the antigen stuff is the saliva test that I think is not quite as whatever effective or whatever. I don't know. The strike rate isn't quite as high, but it's much cheaper. But on the flip side of that, you're doing it daily, so. Yeah, the costs are real. There's no doubt. I think, you know, the PCR test is over $100 a pop for everybody. I think the antigen thing was closer to $10 or something. I don't know. These are very general figures, I think, but somewhere in those kind of ballparks. So, yeah, in addition to all the different revenue streams that the institutions are not getting, the cost of doing business is going up as well.
You know, the antigen test, I just heard that it was around $45, $50, you know, and my team's going to have to do it 3 times a week as just to meet the minimum recommendation from the NCAA. I started putting some numbers together. We're going to spend $100,000 on men's volleyball. That's more than my budget is for 3 years. All right. Just on testing this year. So Heather, do you think that's going to affect some of the mid majors and are they going to be able to play volleyball when they start actually looking at the cost of this testing?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a challenge. I know we're, Bobby, we heard the same thing. We're doing the saliva test. It's about $40 a test. And we're testing 25% of our student athletes when you're not in season. So we're doing the minimum for the NCAA requirement, random testing, and we'll go to the requirements when we start playing 3 times a week. I think it's a huge challenge for departments, not only to come, BYU's telling us every sport but football will be playing in January, every sport. And so we're going from 0 to 100 besides football, which is a great thing for our student athletes if we can pull it off. But yeah, if you start multiplying, I mean, a track team, a swim team, basketball, it's pretty costly. I think it's a huge challenge. I think maybe the hopes were that some of this would get settled by January by postponing, and that some of the testing, with the vaccine and some things would be further along. I think obviously October 28th, and we're still unsure about January is a little concerning.
Well, changing gears a little bit, away from the COVID thing for a minute. Mick had mentioned about the NIL. So Hugh, what's your school position on the NIL and that legislation, and what do you think your program is going to be doing?
Well, it's coming. So I think you've got to be ready for it, or at least try to be prepared in some way to figure out, as an institution within your area, within your demographic, how you can try to make it work. I mean, there's I think there's some really serious implications and ramifications relative to how we want to portray student athletes, especially female student athletes. I think there are all kinds of things that we got to consider in all of this, but at least at first glance, it's not how you feel about it. This is going to be a thing. So let's figure out a strategy, and one that is
Seen the same thing. And anyway, I'm going to turn it over to Ruth.
Okay, I love this. I get at least a couple minutes, if you guys have seen some of our shows before, to answer recruiting and ideas about what you're doing about.
There we go again.
Yeah, that's right. All right, Dave, I'm going to hit you up first. There's at least 10 to 15 fall showcases, combines, or ID talent events. What are the advantages or disadvantages? And then I'm going to go to Hugh and also Heather.
Well, I think the advantage is just try to, everything is, we're living in a virtual world now, and that's a different deal for everybody. And so the advantage is try to get seen, and trying to see kids in the 22, 23, 24 class, or however young you want to go. So I think that's the advantage. The disadvantage is it's hard to trust what you see,
Yeah.
The other part of it,
Okay.
the film is only going to be so you really want to see the kids in person.
All right, Hugh, how about you?
Yeah, that seems about right. It's good. It's good to have a look at the kid, but at some point you want to eyeball them. I think it'd be good to see him in person, and hopefully, there's an opportunity to get that done at some point soon.
Okay, so I'm not going to send you my 2034 tapes, okay? I'll wait on those. All right, Heather, how about you?
Yeah, I think it's great to get a gauge on where kids are, maybe find some new kids you haven't been able to see because we weren't able to go out recruiting, and see where they're at, in another year, and see their development. So I think it's good for the student athletes to be able to get out and play, and we're doing the best we can virtually, and hopefully, yeah, we're getting really good at recruiting off YouTube.
All right, that's good. All right, the last question, and if you could be brief because we're running short on time. Mental health, is the support system at each of your institutions being able to support your athletes? And maybe I should say you also. Let's go to you first.
Oh, go ahead, Hugh.
Yeah, briefly, it's really strong. It's a good program, and I think it's adding a ton of value.
All right, excellent. Heather, how about you? And is it 3 staff, 4 staff, or just you and a couple people?
So our mental, we have counselors on campus and in the athletic department that are there for our kids and for us as coaches. So I think the support is there. The kids, are vocal about wanting to talk, and I think it's a good thing that we're talking about mental health.
Excellent. How about Dave? How about you?
The same thing, and I think it's been a priority for every institution now to provide services for the kids. And I think that during particular pandemic, having them the opportunity to get out the gym and actually practice has been good for everyone, including the
Yeah. Thanks for joining us today, and be sure to tell your friends about our weekly Buzz News show. A special shout out to the 80 coaches and leaders in our sport for being guests on our show over the past 59 weeks, and to our partners, SNA Sports and Baden Sports, and thanks to our content providers, NFHS, JVA, Coaches Insider, and AVCA. See you next week on Master Coaches Buzz and Buzz Reaction.